toilets. There is file. Do may concern, this is my third time.
What is up, Hardcore Nation? It's Hardcore Christopher here, and today I am on webnovel.com, and I decided, I read some Yu-Gi-Oh fan fiction, and let's be honest, the Yu-Gi-Oh fan fiction that I read, I'm not a fan of fan fiction in general, and it just lost my interest. But today, I decided to give a comic, an online book a try. So, today, I will be going through chapters 1 through 10 of Grandson of the Holy Emperor is a Necromancer. That is a mouthful. This is by Shadowcun? Is it Shadowcun? And this has 300 and something chapters. Well, over 300 chapters, so I'm not gonna get it done today. Anyway, let's begin. Chapter 1, Prologue. Life could be so unpredictable. I mean, who could have guessed that you'd just suddenly die from a VR game project you participated in with the simple hopes of making some pocket change? This stinging sensation alongside the smell of cooked flesh. Yep, this was definitely an electrocution. By the time I lost consciousness and woke back up again, I was already possessing a different body. Was this reincarnation? Maybe possession? I couldn't really tell. However, one thing I knew for sure was that the class I picked for the game testing, Necromancer, became my current profession. What's worse was that I now lived in a theocracy where the Holy Emperor set the laws. It seemed that I became a magnanimous grandson of the Holy Emperor. Yes, I know that I messed that M word up. Holy Emperor himself. I'm screwed. Yes, I know what it says, but I like to keep this as PG as possible. That is the prologue. Chapter 2! Imperial Prince is a Gravekeeper. 1. Part 1. Why'd you do that like that? You could have just said, Chapter 2, Imperial Prince is a Gravekeeper, Part 1. Even though this was during the middle of the day, grayish chilly fog was blanketing everything the eyes could see. I gripped the shovel real tight and slammed it hard against the ground. Sweat trickled down as I panted heavily. My whole body felt heavy, like a soaked sponge. I glanced at my side, towards the wagon, filled with corpses. I was currently burying them underground. Anyone unfamiliar with this site might think that they ran into a horrifying scene of mass murder. Regrettably, though, that wasn't the case. Yep, Being a gravekeeper is no picnic at all. Indeed, I was working as a gravekeeper. Chilly atmosphere enveloped the entire graveyard. I shifted my gaze towards a towards a derelict monstrosity on the verge of collapsing. In this northern region, covered by snow 365 days a year, the land of the dead spirits, where rotting corpses and various undeads rampaged about. I was spending my days as the exiled Imperial prince. If you asked who possessed the absolute authority in this continent, then people would most likely point at just one man. He was the king of humanity, an existence that even the lofty emperors had to be respectful and mindful of. He, in a nutshell, was the Holy Emperor, also referred to as God's emissary. Anyone who inherited the Holy Emperor's bloodline would be treated as a person blessed with a noble lineage. Too bad my situation was somewhat different from that. Banishment is it? I clicked my tongue as I stared at the side of the graveyard. The weather might have been chilly, but flies still buzzed around the corpses atop the wagon, with maggots crawling all over said corpses as their companions. I hoisted the shovel on my shoulder. A bitter grin etched my lips. Why did it have to be this particular body, though? I wasn't sure whether this was a reincarnation or a possession, but what mattered here was the fact that the owner of this body had been banished to this place, the land of the dead spirits. He was then given the job of a gravekeeper here. The reason was pretty simple. He was a complete trash, a maggot no one wanted to be associated with. Honestly speaking, this body's original memories didn't exist anymore. However, I would still hear some stories about this body's past on occasion. For example, while walking around the Imperial Palace, he felt quite bored, and so he summoned a servant only to kick and slap the living hell out of the poor person. Another one includes him spotting a servant girl walking around and sexually assaulting her. Okay, I did not think this would take such a turn so quickly. Or he'd mercilessly beat up a tutor coming to teach him just because he got bored again. Sure, a portion of aristocrats would also do something like this. It also means that such a simple reason couldn't have warranted a banishment for the Imperial Prince and become a gravekeeper here. The actual reason why he got banished to not just a regular frontier region, but to a very dangerous one at that. Even becoming a gravekeeper was blasphemy. What's that? That's what. The libido of the Holy Emperor's grandson had awakened, and he tried to rape a certain esteemed daughter of a noble, one who came to the theocratic empire to train to become a lady in waiting. During the deed itself, he was discovered by an archbishop who came to pay his respects to the Holy Emperor. Now, normally, tisk tisk, that malignity is causing yet another incident. That's where the matter should have ended, along with the archbishop stopping the youth. However, the problem was that the lady in training happened to be the granddaughter of the same archbishop who discovered the deed midway. Oh, okay. The granddaughter he sent to the Imperial Palace to learn refinement and elegant. No, exquisite. Etiquette, there we go, was about to be raped, and he got to personally witness that sorry sight. Of course, the Archbishop flipped his lid. Unsurprisingly, the incident of the Archbishop using his crusader to beat the living daylights out of the Imperial grandson at the time occurred. Both of them were summoned before the Holy Emperor right away. One could say that the next most powerful person besides the Cardinal was the Archbishop, but such a thing wouldn't matter after beating up the Holy Emperor's grandson. However, as the grandson was also guilty in this case, both were punished with 2 months of house arrest. Things seemed to have calmed down, with the case now closed, but then he dared to hit me. The immature boy of 15 years old sneaked into the Archbishop's quarters and proceeded to burn his holy scriptures. He broke the cross and then painted the wall with large letters that read, "A lowly bastard who sleeps with goddess Gaia." Despite him living in the theocratic system, and on top of that, he was even the Holy Emperor's grandson, and yet he dared to blaspheme? What a crazy and reckless fool he was. Thanks to that, the Holy Emperor's pent-up rage exploded, and he promptly banished his grandson to the land of the dead spirits up north. The Imperial grandson's authority and status were stripped away from him, and he was even ordered to perform services to the village there. Mourn for the dead and improve yourself that way. This was probably what the Holy Emperor was thinking at the time, while in post-banishment, the influence the boy possessed as the potential successor of the Holy Emperor vanished too. He didn't even have any escorts anymore. It was easy to guess what the Emperor's intentions were. He wouldn't give a damn, even if the boy got kidnapped by another country or his life was endangered by something else in this dangerous land. Basically, the Holy Emperor had abandoned the boy. Even then, suicide is just not on, dude. The grandson, while full of dissatisfaction, headed to a nearby village and went on a rampage. He acted like an arse. I know what I'm saying. I don't mean to yell, but it's there, and quite frankly, I can't put another word in its place, because it's an. If it was a, then I could, but, and not even a day later. Paladins came to visit him. The Imperial grandson got subdued in an instant. He was then imprisoned inside the monastery with nothing but prayers and water as his nourishment. After that, the boy became truly enraged. This is unfair, too unfair. How dare those lowly things? This whole thing must have been completely unacceptable when viewed from the perspective of an once lofty Imperial grandson. Then again, he got banished to some backwoods to lug around corpses and shovel the ground. He probably couldn't see a better future anymore. Was that the reason why he did it? By the time I gained consciousness, I was already flailing about in a noose around my neck. After he hanged himself, indeed, the Holy Emperor's dumb grandson complained about his sad fate and tried to kill himself. Well, it doesn't matter now, does it? That was all in the past now. It wasn't something I should particularly worry about anymore. Anyway, this body had now become mine, and my second life had begun. However, it would have been nice to live the life of a gold spoon in the Imperial Palace. But, well, living as a gravekeeper wasn't so bad either. Actually, this suited my personality better. Maybe because of the profession Necromancer that I chose in the game I was playing for my part-time work in the previous life. I didn't really feel any repulsion while handling all these corpses. Hell, I was even okay with all the dreary, gloomy fog and the still silence, as well as the lingering stench wafting around here. I sincerely pray that I'm not some loon who loves to spend time with dead bodies, I muttered to myself as I glanced at the corpses. There was something really odd about me, though for sure a necromancer was a magician-type profession that used demonic energy to rule over death. But now it felt like the characteristics of this particular profession had been altered somewhat. I glanced around the Vinicky after confirming that no one... Oh, vicinity. I glanced around the vicinity after confirming that no one was around. I cautiously touched one of the corpses. Suddenly, the body that was ready to be buried emitted white light, and sure enough, it began standing back up on its feet while creaking like a wooden doll. Oh. Rotting flesh, empty eye sockets, and even the unmistakable stagger. This was without a doubt a zombie. Yes, it was definitely a zombie, but I frowned deeply while looking at such a creature. Why do you possess...
Sorry, how else was I supposed to get down from there?
divinity, though? Forget about the aura of the dead. This zombie was overflowing with the aura of life instead. It was a zombie overflowing with divine entity. The necromancy skill I possessed were resurrection of the dead, dead spirit soldier, plague of debilitation, swamp of death, and horrifying curse. As for my sundry passive skills, I also boasted the mind's eye and translation, etc. I possessed a corpse of... Let's try that again. I possessed a couple of other skills, there we go, but it seemed that I couldn't use them yet. I wasn't able to remember them at all. However, they sometimes flinted in and out of my mind, so I merely thought that it depended on my proficiency with my current skills. In order to activate them in the case of my necromancy skills, they displayed effects closely related to all things life-related. For instance, if I summoned zombies or skeletons, the ones appearing would be filled with divinity, there we go, and not the normal demonic energy. The plague and the curse skills actually granted blessings all the while the swamp of death actually summoned a pit filled with holy water. All these skills that foretold one's death and had now been altered to ones that bestowed life. The reason for that must be it's probably this body's fault. I took a closer look at my current body. Rather than demonic energy, it was brimming with divinity instead. Even though he was a complete butthole, there we go, and possessed not a shred of faith in his bones, he was still blessed with a sizable amount of divinity because he was the grandson of the Holy Emperor. He was the grandson of the Holy Emperor. I wasn't sure what the levels of other priests were like around these parts, but this body's divinity was probably about average in his age group. Sir Imperial Prince Nim, Your Highness, a voice called out to me from beyond the foggy footpath. I looked back to discover two men, both seemingly farmers. Farmers fumbling about while making their way out of the forest's narrow path. Chapter 3. Imperial Prince is a Gravekeeper, Part 2. They were wearing masks and with some difficulty lugging around a corpse. I was so preoccupied with what I was doing that I failed to notice them approaching me. Go inside. The divine entity filled zombie wiggled about and reacted to my words. It willingly entered the pit on the ground and comfortably laid down as an added bonus. It even began dragging in the surrounding earth to bury itself. I took care of the remaining soil scattered about. I grunted heavily as I closed up the ground and carefully hardened it. Nice. While feeling satisfied, I sneaked a glance at the farmers approaching me. Huh? Weren't you with someone just now, sir? Nope. I shook my head to deny what he said. It'd be wiser to keep the villagers in the dark about the undead. Could you even imagine the kind of reactions it would cause if the Holy Emperor's grandson was seen hanging around with zombies, the Holy Emperor's seventh grandson has grown disheartened 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 by his fate and signed a contract with the devil. I somehow managed to miraculously survive the suicide attempt, but now I was controlling zombies. A heresy inquisitor might really get dispatched here immediately. It'd be rather difficult trying to convince the priests of the Holy Emperor's kingdom when they only believed in what they wanted to believe. So, Sir Imperial Prince Nim, ahem. As for I was referred to as either the Imperial Prince or the Seventh Prince. Originally, I should have been referred to as the Imperial Grandson. But the thing was, the Holy Emperor's son, my father, who was the first in line for the throne, had already ascended to the seat, but then he promptly went missing afterward. So my current title was apparently the Imperial Prince. What we greet your highness, the Imperial Prince Nim. There was no way that a couple of villagers from the sticks would know anything about decorum or exquisite. The two farmers belatedly bowed their heads a little as their greeting. For some reason, they seemed to be reading my mood too. The normal owner, the original owner of this body must have thrown an almighty tantrum after such greetings were offered in his way, probably. I actually preferred these simpler greetings, though. Besides that, I also had no clue as to what the established decorum or etiquette was myself, so I was in no position to demand that from these two. I pointed at the corpse they brought in with my chin and spoke to the farmers. What is that now? Feeling a bit fatigued, I stabbed the shovel on the ground and leaned against it. The farmers quickly explained the story behind the dead body. You see, sir, my neighbor Baron died from the plague. It was so terrible. I'm worried about us getting infected by the plague ourselves and dying later. You didn't cremate the body, I said to pure dissatisfaction, causing the farmers to stare at each other. They then replied with awkward expressions. Well, that, it's a bit. Even though we weren't that close, we still said good mornings to each other every day, so we figured that we should at least get a decent burial. You see, we heard that a simple purification ceremony is enough to let us bury him as an intact corpse. We got tasked with this job recently, so we don't know how we so we don't know much about the finer details on what we should do, sir. How should we even cremate? I glared at them with eyes filled with dissatisfaction as I raised myself up. It'd be fine to cremate the body and bring only the ashes, but these villagers seemed to be rather disinclined to harm the corpses. Perhaps it was due to the affection they felt towards one another when the dead body was still alive or something. Obviously, the number of things I had to do increased because of this, but oh well. I raised my shovel up high and then I glared at the farmers. The farmers flinched in surprise and backtracked in a hurry. Imperial Prince Nim. One farmer was panicking while I told you his old habit is still there. He didn't change after his suicide. The other farmer was shouting loudly, his complexion ashen white. They probably thought that my shovel was aimed at them. It was then. Ooh. The corpse, wrapped tightly in fabric, suddenly withered and began moving. It extended its hands out and grabbed one of the farmers. Its cheeks were torn open and its mouth was split wide as if its jaw wanted to fall off. Just before the damn thing could take a bite out of the farmer's neck, my shovel sliced down the edges of the farming tool, slammed into the animated corpse's head. Yeek! The farmers got the shock of their lives and ended up falling on their butts. I lightly dusted my hand and spoke. I keep telling you people. Raising the shovel again, and I performed the kill confirm strike. A rather bone-chilling noise issued out. If you don't cremate the corpse, it'll turn into a zombie in 3-4 days. This world was rather unique in that way. I wasn't such about a bustling city, but the thing was, when the person died near negative spots, such as somewhere out in the remote rural areas, some gloomy forest, or even in the middle of a battlefield. There was one out of 10 chance. There was a 1 out of 10 chance he or she would be revived as a zombie. It was like the standard rule of this world, or some such. And the ones tasked with dealing such zombies among the villagers were called hunters, gravekeepers, or the priests. The negative spot found in the surrounding vicinity of the land of the dead spirits was especially strong. However, this was also probably because this was the final resting grounds, of the Necromancer King. The one who turned the continent into an ocean of death in the past. Thanks to that, anyone who died in this place had about a 50% chance of turning into an undead, and the villagers already knew about this, and yet their dumb beliefs meant that they were reluctant to cremate the dead with their own hands. Their reasoning was quite simple, a superstition about getting cursed themselves. I wiped the sweat off of my forehead and then drank some water out of the leather water skin attached to my hips. Whatever. Thanks for your hard work. You may go now. I waved my hand dismissively. The two farmers swallowed nervously as they stood back up. They then studied each other's moods before quietly opening their mouths. Excuse me, Sir Imperial Prince, what now? I stared at them as I drank some more water. Imperial Prince Nim, sir, you're a priest in a way, yes? I don't know crap about being a priest or not, but I'm the grandson of the Holy Emperor, sure. I'm just the grandson of a man who enjoys the authority of an emperor and a pope at the same time. Well, that's what I was on the outside. Ah, I forgot about the divinity inside me. In that case, is it possible for you to bless us so that we don't get infected by the plague? I looked at them with a less than impressed glare. What the hell were they on about? There's no way you wouldn't get infected by the plague with something like that. Do you think that it's some sort of vaccination? Besides, I didn't even possess such skills either. I wasn't even a priest, but a damn necromancer. So why the hell? I shook my head as a response to their request. But the farmers didn't give up so easily. Even if it's just a simple baptism, they held hands and begged, their expressions serious and earnest. The plague doing the rounds in this area lately must have been pretty grave. But then again, that had to be since corpses were frequently being brought into the graveyard. The appeal that the villagers sent a nearby feudal lord must have fallen on deaf ears. At this rate, it wouldn't be strange to see a whole village disappear. What do you mean by baptism? I've never done anything like that before. Please, don't be like that. These farmers seem to be under the assumption that I wasn't helping them out because I couldn't be bothered about their fate. They rummaged through their pockets and fished out a handful of coins before presenting me with those. This isn't much, but please. Indeed, it was literally a pocket change that a little kid might carry around. I alternated my gaze between the two farmers, and they looked back at me with pleading faces. I spat out a lengthy groan. If that can put your minds at ease, even though I said that I still didn't know how to perform a baptism or whatever. I mean, when would I have ever had the chance to do something like that? I tried to recall that what I saw in passing from TV in my previous life. I poured a little bit of water from the water skin and at the two farmers after drawing a sloppy cross in the air. I mumbled out. Amen. Even if it was just for show, I thought it'd be discourteous not to do it. Originally, one would have to spray around holy water to recite the holy scripture, but as I didn't know how to do that, I decided to just gloss over the finer details. When the farmers saw how sloppy I was, they sighed under their breaths, but still they gathered their hands and offered their prayers. We pray that Gaia's blessing will be with us. It was exactly then. You have blessed your target. But how? Chapter 4. Imperial Prince is a graveyard. It is a gravekeeper. As I studied the distancing backs of the two farmers, the mind's eye skill showed me their current condition. Name: Grill. Age: Growl. Age: 35. Specialty: farming, physical labor. Currently in a blessed state. There it was, the status info so short that someone who couldn't be bothered must have written it. However, I shouldn't be worrying about that right now. Blessed, I only drew a cross with my fingers and said amen though. Despite my actions, that could be construed as sacrilegious. The divinity inside my body still leaked out and the skill activated on its own. More importantly, though, I didn't possess any skill called blessing. I sank into a deep contemplation before remembering a certain skill. Horrifying curse. Damage a target for a prolonged time by inflicting pain. It seemed that its attribute had been flipped on its head. Well, it shouldn't pose any problems later, right? What could possibly happen anyway? I mean, it wasn't a curse but a blessing, so it should be fine. Even rotting food would serve as medicine if you don't get sick after eating it. If you didn't die after getting hit by magic, it would be a blessing in and of itself. If something really did go wrong, they would surely seek me out right away. With these thoughts in mind, I decided not to worry about the matter anymore. I was a gravekeeper, the priest that maintained the monstrosity, buried the dead, and performed the purification ceremony. Indeed, there was no need for me to sweat over the ongoings of the outside world. Right? No need to mind the outside world. My job was to simply start shoveling, dump the maggot-infested corpses inside the burial pits, and then perform the purification ceremony so no one would turn into zombies. That's it. I felt no dissatisfaction towards what I had to do. In fact, I didn't feel any repulsion towards the dead bodies, which probably had something to do with the effects of my profession, Necromancer. This job was even rewarding in its own way and could be fun at times too. However, this ain't it. Imperial Prince, Nim. Imperial Prince, Nim.
Nobody's friendly around here.
The farmers from before had shown up again while pulling a wagon with a great difficulty. This time, however, the wagon was now carrying 4 or 5 corpses instead of one body they lugged around previously. The accompanying flies and
Look, they like the static too, Miles.
wriggling maggots were simply an additional bonus. I fell into despair after seeing that wagon. God damn it.
It's a common theme.
There's more?
God hates sickness. God hates
Each of the bodies weighed at least somewhere between 50 to 60 kilos. Digging the burial pits and moving the corpses were easy since I could just turn them into zombies and make them do all the hard work. Afterwards, all I had to do was close the graves and perform the pure functory purification ceremony. That's it. It was possible to take care of everything so effortlessly, but I couldn't utilize my skills at all thanks to the farmers that kept paying me a visit far too often. In the end, I had to shovel, and then shovel some more. On top of that, I now had to lug around the bodies and perform the burial properly. This had to be the zenith of all hard laborers in this world, period. God damn it. To think that the Holy Emperor's grandson, supposedly beloved by the gods, had to perform such stupidity, hardcore labor. This didn't make an iota of sense. Ah, the highest esteemed goddess of love and mercy, Gaia. Have we become sworn enemies now? I inwardly threw curses and insults in the direction of the goddess that the theocratic empire worshipped. While doing so, I flinched greatly as I stared at the corpses. How many days has it been since they died? Pardon? Oh, maybe 3 or 4. What about the cremation? As you can see, we didn't do it. You idiots! You farmers are absolutely idiots! The wagon suddenly began buckling wildly, and then 3 zombies promptly stood up. Ka-ooh. Oh, ka-ooh. While spitting out phlegm filled roars, the zombies tumbled down from the wagon. Rock! The farmers cried out in panic. I became utterly speechless by this scene. Hell, I was even tempted to pretend that I noticed nothing and ignore them for now. Why was I given this gravekeeper job? Being thrown into the army would have been more preferable than this. I groaned under my breath as I wielded the shovel still in my grasp. Then I began smacking the heads of the zombies, the first blow, second, and then the third. The zombies collapsed as their heads exploded. Blood splattered on my face. I scowled reflectively at this. After wiping the blood away with the back of my hand, I lifted up the unmoving bodies. Damn it, this was still a part of my job. If only my profession was a warrior or a barbarian. However, my current job was that of a necromancer, the profession that was the height of sneaky cheapness, one that simply threw a bunch of zombies and skeletons out there and watched them fight for you. Okay, I think after I get done with this chapter, I think that'll be it. I said 1 through 10. This is I think chapters 1 through 4. We may just do 5 chapters until this is done. So, wait. So, stopping on 5, starting on 5, so 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. So, 5 chapters once a week I can do. Such was the characteristic of this dark magic profession, meaning there was no way that my strength stat would be any good. I definitely had a weak, blank priest's physique, but my muscles and stamina were built up a bit by all the shoveling exercise I've done lately, which barely managed to prop me up until now. Even if we're dealing with zombies, I'll still feel bad if they're damaged like this, you know. I tossed the corpse with the busted head down the burial pit. The farmers helped me too, sweat trickling down their faces. Soon, most of the work was done. Feeling tired, I sat down on a tombstone that hadn't been set in place yet. While pretending to pull something out from a leather bag, I accessed my item window. I pulled out a boiled potato and took a bite of it with bloodied hands, and all this couldn't really be helped, though I though trying to wash myself before eating every time would be a waste of time. Also, this body must have been sturdier than I thought, or maybe I should thank the divinity instead. Yeah, the divinity inside me. I hadn't fallen ill once after occupying this body. Excuse me. It was then that the farmers finished with their quest to help me in my work. Suddenly addressed me. They exchanged glares with each other as if they were scared of the sudden change in my mood, and then they cautiously opened their mouths. Uh, it, it's like the village has been cursed by an evil spirit, but because how can a plague like this one be an evil spirit?
I'm sorry, I like how he's like pointlessly moving around the room while he's talking.
That wasn't even funny, dude. Looks like these gullible fools got suckered into believing yet another baseless superstition here. Well, Imperial Prince Nim, you're a priest, aren't you? How about exorcising the evil spirit from the village? Son of a gun! They were now asking me to become an exorcist too? I frowned heavily towards the farmers as I spoke. I'm telling you this right now. I'm a priest only in name, and yet you want someone like that to exorcise evil spirits? Say something that makes sense, will ya? Unfortunately, my job description meant that I couldn't refuse them. As long as I proposed divinity, I should be able to defeat all the undead in this place. However, this was a really cruel thing to ask from a 15-year-old boy, and so shouldn't requesting the paladins that showed up like clockwork every month the smarter thing to do here? Besides, I'm only 15 years old. Do you really want to entrust the exorcism to a 15-year-old kid? The two farmers shrunk back since they also knew this point. Oh, oh, of course, but, the Lord Paladins who visited the village the last time told us to leave everything to you it's truly a unless it's a truly dangerous matter. Imperial Prince Nim. Those stinking paladin buttholes. Just as I began hurling all sorts of curses at them, also, you've bestowed us with blessings, haven't you? You're an amazing priest, capable of that. So we were hoping that you could also purify the village. What? Uh, what were they on about now? I stared at the two farmers with a puzzled look on my face. They noticed my expression spoke up again. After you baptized us, we weren't struck down by the plague.
So I'm gonna turn the lights fluid and the sub left generator and then turn off the fail safe. Okay. I think I got it.
Oh my god, she's delicious.
Okay.
You have no idea how funny this is.
I tilted my head after hearing them. Well, you two just got lucky, that's all. We've been dumped with this task to cart around these infected bodies the whole day. But then, rather than falling ill, we the farmers began patting their torsos as if it was the oddest thing ever. It's as if we've been filled with lots of energy for the past few days. My tilting head leaned even further to the side, but surely that's because of the stamina you built up by farming. The the injuries we suffered healed really quickly too, but that's because the folks of this world are especially sturdy. So both both me and this fool, the two of us are the only survivors from our village. I stared at the two farmers with a dazed expression. It had already been a week since I used the skill horrifying curse / blessing on these two. Between then and now, about 20 corpses were brought here. Those must have been their fellow villagers then. Yet these two farmers who brought in all those plague-ridden corpses were still perfectly fine even right now. They weren't wearing those cumbersome masks because they got in the way. The efforts of making across the air with my hand and saying amen, was that strong? Yes, it is. The farmers nodded their heads with certainty. Holy cow, dear goddess Gaia, did you feel lazy like me and just haphazardly slap them with a blessing or something? I knew it. I was wondering why so much divinity leaked out of me back then. It seemed that the blessing itself had been pretty generous, to say the least. I crossed my arms and groaned loudly. A skill activated all on its own, and it even has a super awesome effect too. Pardon? It's nothing. I guess it'd be better for me to raise the proficiency of my skills so that I could use them at will later. That'd be much smarter. That'd be a much smarter thing to do rather than not even knowing that I somehow used my skills. I shifted my gaze back to the farmer duo. Did you say that you two are the only survivors? Then where are you staying? We're currently residing in a neighboring village. I massaged my forehead. This was a job I had to do anyway, so I figured it'd be better to do it as soon as possible, and as an added bonus, the two of you helped me out. Doing it while I had two additional helpers would be smarter, right? The farmers became somewhat confused after hearing me, but they still nodded their heads. What a bloody... What a bloody spectacular sight this is. We arrived at the farmer's old village. 30 or so shacks greeted us, with a portion of them having already collapsed. There were shattered windows and broken doors. Various filth and corpses littered their vicinity. A village that would have had a starring role in a horror movie was waiting for us. I observed the conditions of the corpses lying around the village. After turning one of them over, I ran my hands over the damaged parts and tilted my head. Looks like he's been bitten by something. Did an animal take a bite out of this corpse? No. Hang on. The bite mark was too small to say that an animal did this. I raised my head and scanned the village. What a relief. There doesn't seem to be any zombies around. The corpses found around the village were either quietly staying dead or were far too damaged to become undead. I looked at all the puke stains and filth scattered everywhere and scowled real deeply. Since there were so many dead bodies around, I naturally spotted lots of rats gnawing on them too. The rodent closest to me stopped chewing a corpse and raised its head to meet my stare. It had a disgusting stench and red eyes filled with murderous intent, as well as the faint trace of demonic energy coming from it. A zombie? It then bared its crooked fangs and dashed towards me at a frightening turn of speed. It was so quick, as if it couldn't wait to bite the crap out of me.
Slowly out there, kiddo. I'm not getting any younger. Even my van is getting less cute every day.
You're still cute, Dad.
Thanks. We both know I'm borderline creepy.
Introducing Colliders, your favorite candy flavors twisted, chopped, or laid into a dessert that's made to spoon. Colliders desserts. Find them in the refrigerator.
You may be seated.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
This is a case of films versus Williams.
Okay.
Miss Phillips, you claim that you are certain the defendant's deceased
I
son
raised my shovel
is the father of your
and then slammed it down. The rodent was sliced in half, its torn flesh bouncing around. What's up with this guy? Even though it was in two pieces, now the rodent wasn't dead yet, despite ending up as a severed torso. It was still trying to bite into my leather boots. I lifted my foot up and heavily stomped on it. The farmers flinched at my actions and shrunk away. Since when? Pardon?
Before I get into the case, Miss Williamson, I do want to acknowledge that I'm allowing you to wear sunglasses in the courtroom today because you are dealing with an issue.
I squatted down and picked up the dead rodent before glaring at the farmer duo. This thing was a zombie. A damn undead rodent? Okay. So, since when did things like this little guy begin running around in the village? The farmers hastily exchanged glances with each other. Then, while making perplexed expressions, they shook their heads. We don't know what a refreshingly honest reply that was. Is that information important, Your Highness? They tilted their heads. Well, no, not really. I tossed the zombie rat away. It wasn't only humans who could turn into zombies. A portion of any life form that died near a negative field would turn into an undead. You wouldn't turn into a zombie just because you got bitten by an undead in this world. However, if the toxin spread in you and you died from that, then sure, there was a good chance that you'd turn into one. But if not, you'd just suffer from high fever. As long as you didn't die, you'd naturally recover. Meaning it was that sort of an illness, no more and no less. The stench is pretty intolerable, though. This rodent, however, was no longer on the level of a simple zombification. A seriously thick amount of demonic energy was permitting from within it. Since there were so much, there was a high chance of a human dying from its bite and then turning into an undead later. Was this a 100-year-old zombie rat or something? If there was only one or maybe two of these critters around, other animals or even humans would have easily killed it off, but I shifted my gaze again. I spotted pitch black shadows.
Did he ever find out that she had slept with somebody else? Yeah, but she told him. How can I sleep with somebody else?
Congelating around a certain collapsed shack. Dozens upon dozens of zombie rodents, all with crimson eyes, were glaring at me. Seeing this spectacle caused my eye muscles twitch all on their own. With such a vermin horde around, it'd been even stranger to see a village that managed to escape unscathed. You two, are you sure you didn't start a vermin farm or something? I asked the farmers, and of course they hurriedly shook their heads. Once they also saw the zombie rodents, they began stumbling backwards in pure terror. There is no way. It wasn't like this a few days ago. I remember now. You said you left this village, didn't you? The farmers quickly nodded their heads. Even if this place is our home village, everyone was already dead from the plague. Who'd want to stay here? Our families have left this world a long time ago. Already, this is why we didn't have any reasons to stay put. We're currently staying in the neighboring village. They readily accepted you two. Yes. In turn, the village tasked us with delivering those who died from the plague. Oh, so that's why you were accepted. Seriously? Man, there's so many things I've gotta do now. I glared back at the zombie rodents. Well, there's your evil spirit. Not only that, they're pretty dreadful ones at that too. Hundreds of zombie rats opened their eyes wider, and then the horde began to dash towards us. My sole weapon was the shovel in my hand. Unfortunately, it'd be impossible to fight them with just this. Imperial Prince Nim Run!
And I know a lot of the hurt and the
While
anger
glaring
and the fear
at them,
because you have
I stabbed the shovel into the ground. I sucked in a deep breath,
you don't wish that on your
and and as
sometimes you just got to take a moment and let the tears fall.
we I wished air exhaled out of my mouth. I muttered out the name of a skill, Swamp of Death. Okay, that's chapter 4. I would love to read chapter 5, however, I'm gonna call it here. I hope you all enjoyed. I will be continuing this because this is freaking cool. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. As always, I'm Hardcore Christopher. Keep it hardcore, everyone.